Here's basic biblical counseling, just kind of rabbit trail a little bit. Basic biblical counseling is this: naming the lie and replacing it with the truth. Find the lie and replace it with the truth. You have somebody dealing with, any type of addiction. You have somebody dealing with self-worth. You identify the lie and replace the truth. And you're like, okay, where's the biblical standpoint for that? Well, I just read it earlier when Satan is tempting Jesus. Jesus fought Satan with truth. And this is effectively what we're doing as worship leaders too. As we battle the principalities of darkness, as we gather to worship, we are replacing lies. So what is the truth that people need to hear Sunday mornings? We need to replace the lies with truth, and we sing the truth in the songs that we choose. Worship leaders, number 3. Worship leaders are called to use music as a vehicle that serves the needs and culture of the church, providing them with an opportunity to respond to a revelation of truth wholeheartedly and without hindrance. I'll read that again. Worship leaders are called to use music as a vehicle that serves the needs and culture of the church, providing them an opportunity to respond to a revelation of truth wholeheartedly and without hindrance. Here's the first thing: service through teaching, through music. Colossians 3:16. Let's open up our Bibles. Let's go there. Colossians 3:16. Colossians 3:16 says this: "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly," not haphazardly, not just a little bit. "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, and as you sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs in gratitude in your hearts to God." Did you catch that? Let the word of Christ dwell as you teach and admonish, and as you sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with gratitude in your hearts to God. There's a connection there that we don't often find. Let me expound on that. First thing, music was an oral tradition of Paul's day. It is a tradition we still maintain today. We are called to utilize this custom to admonish, build up, edify, encourage other believers. Is your music on Sunday morning doing that? Well, it was a nice piece. It was nice to hear that guitar solo, and man, he worked so hard on that. Man, look at him go, man. Look at how much he's grown. He's able to play that cool Lincoln Brewster lick and blah, 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 blah. Is your music accomplishing the purpose that it's supposed to be doing on Sunday morning? Is it building up? Is it edifying? Is it encouraging other believers? Take note of this second thing. We teach through music, through songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. Did you get that? Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly as you teach. The music that you will use Sunday morning is teaching people. There's theology and doctrine in the songs that you choose. You better be able to explain what it is from the songs that you're using. And if you don't understand them, may I encourage you, don't use the song until you do. There are hymns that I've stayed away from because I don't understand what I'm singing. And if I don't understand what I'm singing, chances are the people out there don't know what they're singing. And then that just kind of reduces our worship time to kind of this, oh, well, man, I hope this is working for somebody. I don't really know what we're singing right now. Come on. God has called us to engage our intellect. Know what your songs are teaching. Understand them. Look at the lyrics and read through them and say, oh, well, I think he means this, but it's not really clear. Let me tell you, good congregational songs will be clear. Will be clear. They will be clear. They will not, you won't be singing them, scratching your head and saying, well, I think the composer meant this when he said this, and I think this meant this to him, and blah, blah. No. It'll be clear. That's what makes good congregational worship songs. And if you look at the songs that by the test of time have stood throughout the generations, they are very clear in what they are saying. They are poetical, they are descriptive, but they are very clear in what they are saying. So some questions to consider as we expand a little further on this. What are our songs teaching? It's a very good question to ask. What are our songs teaching? Maybe a good exercise for you would be to take your worship set next time you lead worship, and to just beside each title say, okay, what does this song say about God? What does it teach? What are the characteristics? And there's some good resources. How many of you have seen the hymnals or the the songbooks that they'll manufacture now that actually expound on what the song is about. They'll either give a scriptural reference, or they'll have a heading that talks about it. You guys know what I'm talking about? Have any of you guys seen those before? Those are really, really valuable resources, okay? We don't lead worship blindly. God has not called us to be puppets that get up there and sing music. We need to take an intellectual interest in what we are singing and understanding what we are doing. That's important. That's very important. Are we being wise in what songs we use? Are we being wise in what songs we use? Here's the second thing, and I really need everybody to look up and pay attention. Let me read this through and you can fill in the blanks, but I don't want to be misunderstood here, okay? In the content of our congregational song, this is a question to ask, is the content of our congregational songs produce more questions than answers? Is the content of our congregational songs producing more questions than answers? Now listen, I don't want you to miss this. There are a lot of esoteric songs that in their poetry leave the parishioner with more questions about what they are singing and thus become distracting. I'm going to flat out tell you that some of David Crowder's music does this. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying in a congregational setting, my experience with some of his music is that it is so beautifully poetical that it is very difficult sometimes to understand what the objective truth is. And what ends up happening is that when we want to gather people and unify people, it ends up being a distraction because people aren't really sure about what they're singing about. Do you understand how that could be true? Do you understand what I'm talking about? And it's not just his music. I'm just using that as a great example. Because my inkling is that many of you guys have either heard his music or have made a note of his unique and very beautiful way of using poetry that sometimes really maybe was written from his own perspective, a subjective perspective. And you can appreciate that on your own time. May I suggest to you that when we're gathering together for congregational worship, that we use songs that unify and that don't distract and that don't raise up any, not to say that there's not a place for challenging, but that we use songs that unify. Let me read on here. There are a lot of esoteric songs in their poetry leave the parishioner with more questions about what they are singing and thus become distracting. Some of Crowder's stuff is this. We need to revisit the purpose of congregational worship. Okay, so we need to revisit the purpose of congregational worship and let the songs that we choose flow out of this. Okay? If the purpose is to make it easy for those we serve to enter in, is that one of our purposes? Would you agree with that? To make it easy for those to enter into worship. Let us choose songs that are challenging. Okay? Let us choose songs that are challenging, but whose content is easy to grasp and partake in. Do those songs exist? Absolutely. Absolutely. Let us choose songs whose content is easy to grasp and partake in. At the very least, if a song is worth doing, okay, if you're saying, okay, well, that kind of song is worth doing, this does have enough, lyrical punch in it that this is something that our congregation really needs to sing or really needs to hear. Let us lead by giving an explanation for what it is. An example that I think I've shared with you before, Days of Elijah, one of the only songs that we sing written in the prophetic tense of the voice. It talks about things that are to come that have not yet happened. You want to confuse your church? Sing that song without explanation. These are the days of Elijah, the rebuilding of the temple. It's talking in the tense of these things are happening or either happening, yet we all know that they have not happened yet. Don't do the disservice to your congregation by letting them sing in ignorance. Explain what that song means. And saying, hey, as we sing these lyrics this morning, Days of Elijah, we are singing these lyrics in the prophetic, saying, God, we know that these things have not happened yet, but they are to come. Maybe there's other songs that, like that, maybe need an explanation. Go ahead and do that. This is what worship leading is. You're not up there with a guitar to suggest people. You are teaching. You don't need to do a whole sermon, maybe just a couple of lines, but explain to them the content of what you are singing so that they can understand and so that they can sing with intellect and understanding. Don't leave people in the dark. Let us lead by making provision for an explanation before we leave.